Tomas Hertl at 75 points. The Sharks going to have a better power play. Bold predictions coming. Plus, we get caught up on some of the news and notes, and the San Jose Barracuda had some media availability. So, what I heard from John McCarthy and Joe Will, all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, contributor at Inside the Rink, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network, we cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you got to do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts, or you can subscribe on YouTube, or do both. Both is great. And today we got a jam-packed episode where we're going to be talking about some of my bold predictions for the Sharks in the 2023-2024 season, including Tomas Hertl at 75 points. It sounds crazy, but I'm going to show you why it's not. Then we're going to talk about the power play. My bold prediction on the Sharks and Anthony Duclair and Alexander Barabanov, and get caught up on news and notes and the media availability from the San Jose Barracuda. So we'll be touching on that in the third segment. Before we get into everything, want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you guys by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. So, bold predictions, and there's some bold ones in there. I know yesterday we kind of did a little bit over unders with our good friend Max from the Hockey News, and these ones I wanted to get a little bolder, my personal spin on some of these. And I'm going to start with one, Tomas Hertl. And I think Hertl sets his career high at points at 75. And I know what you're going to think. How, JD? Timo Meier is gone. This team is going to be bad. Erik Karlsson is gone. Both these players were key contributors to the Sharks last year. And Hertl only got 63 points last year with both those guys on the team for either the entire season in Erik Karlsson's case or majority of the season with Timo Meier's case. And I get it. But I think the absence of both these players paves the way for our favorite Czech prince to be the guy on the Sharks and be the 1C that we know he is capable of being. So I think Hertl, 75 points. I think it's going to be 35 goals and 40 assists this year. And here's my reasoning behind it. The Sharks are just a deeper team in the forward group, right? With the additions of Filip Zadina, you have Mike Hoffman, you have Anthony Duclair, we have William Eklund is going to be a full-time NHL player. Last year, the Sharks were basically like a 1.5 line team, right? You had Hertl and Timo, and whoever they cobbled together with them, and then you had Couture and Barabanov and kind of whoever they cobbled together with them. Now the Sharks, again, none of the players that I'm mentioning are as good as Timo Meier. Timo Meier is an amazing player. I would love to have Timo Meier be on the Sharks right now, but the Sharks can actually put together, I think, 2 competent lines, 2+ competent lines. They're not the greatest lines, but they are actual NHL lines that gives Hertl a chance to be more productive. All right. Number 2 big reason. He's not going to have to defer to Timo Meier. And I know he has basically said that he kind of deferred too much to Timo Meier last year. He was trying to help his friend secure that big contract. Mission accomplished. Timo Meier had an amazing season, scoring 40 goals last year. I did say Timo Meier was going to score 40 goals last year. I also said he was going to hit 90 points. Didn't do that part, but he did hit the 40 goal mark. But the numbers, I know the numbers aren't going to make sense, right? If you look at Hertl's season last year, in 57 games with Timo Meier on the roster, Hertl scored 48 points in this game, which would be at 0.84 points per game. That will put you at 69 points in a season if you kept that same pace. In the games after Timo Meier, 22 games after Timo Meier got traded, he scored 15 points in those, which is a 0.68 points per game, which would put him on a pace of 56 points per game. And again, I get it, right? Remember, Tomas Hertl last year and Timo Meier last year started the season ice cold before they started kind of getting going, right? I think it was, for Hertl, it was, they started the season over in Europe. Coming back, this team just kind of struggled to kind of put together any offense in the beginning of the season. He scored a goal in the very first game of the season. And then he didn't score another goal until October 20th, so he didn't get his next point until October 20th when he assisted on an Erik Karlsson overtime game winner. Then, so that's almost like 2 weeks of not scoring for Tomas Hertl. I think Tomas Hertl is going to be more consistent this year. And I think it's going to have a lot to do with just having a more deeper team and him being the guy, right? There's nobody else. It is going to be Tomas Hertl's show. Yes, I know they have Anthony Duclair. I know Mike Hoffman has been able to score. Zadina, you hope he kind of takes that step. But I think it's just going to be the Tomas Hertl show this year. And I think the goal scoring is going to be more productive than what we have seen from him, especially last year, because the Sharks need him to be that guy. There's, again, Anthony Duclair scored 30 goals 2 years ago, but is still working his way back from an Achilles injury, right? It's easy to pencil in Duclair as a potential 30-goal scorer, but what if he's just not that guy anymore? It's a very fair thing that could happen, right? Anthony Duclair could just not be the same guy he was before his Achilles injury. Mike Hoffman, yes, former 30-goal scorer, but the last couple seasons on a bad Montreal team, he's not gotten anywhere close to that. So yes, I know it sounds like I'm killing my own point, but I think the goal scoring is going to be the big thing for Tomas Hertl, and I think there's just more options. So if Duclair doesn't work out, you do have Zadina, you do have Eklund, you do have Barabanov, I think is going to be a more of a scorer this year. You do have Granlund, who I know can pass. There's just more options for the Sharks, and this doesn't even include when you start to see guys like Daniel Gushin or Tristan Robbins start to kind of enter the lineup, or Jacob Peterson when he comes back. We've seen him been able to contribute as well. I think there's just a deeper Sharks roster, not as talented as Timo Meier, but I think it's just a deeper roster so that the Sharks can put out more competent lines. Plus, I think the power play is going to be better. And without it force feeding it to Timo Meier, I think you're going to see a more well-distributed power play. And I think Tomas Hertl can kind of be the guy on the power play this year. I think Tomas Hertl will be the power play leader in goals this year for the Sharks, not Timo Meier, because I think the power play is going to be better because it's going to be, again, not as talented with Erik Karlsson and Timo Meier not around, but I think you have two competent power play units, and I think the 5-man forward, the chaos approach forward group, I think there's a chance for it to be chaotic, but I think there's a chance for it to work, and we'll talk about that more here in a minute. So, Tomas Hertl, 75 points. That is my bold prediction, number one for the Sharks. So, before we continue, we talk about the power play, and then we talk more about Barabanov and Duclair, and to get into some news notes and media availability, do need to take a quick break. And talk to you guys about our good friends over at FanDuel. And if you want to snap into action this NFL season, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed if you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. So if you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Again, keep hammering the Christian McCaffrey anytime touchdown until he stops, because Christian McCaffrey is just going to keep scoring touchdowns because he's very good at doing that. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, bold prediction number 2 of 3. The Sharks power play is going to finish the top half of the league. And again, this power play was not very good last year, especially with what we saw, right? The Sharks last year finished 25th at 18.4%. I think last year, the middle of the pack was 21.2. That's basically a 2% jump, which sounds not like a lot, but that is 10 teams basically in that jump right there, and that 2% jump. I think the power play is going to be better, but here's the caveat to this. I also think the Sharks are going to lead the NHL in shorthanded goals given up, because I just think it's going to be chaotic, right? So they're going to be middle of the pack when it comes to power play percentage, but I think they're going to lead the NHL in shorthanded goals because they're not going to have a true defenseman. And I think whether it's Granlund or whether it's, so here's your legitimate options of the kind of 4 players who will probably be running the power play at some point this year, right? You have Mikael Granlund right now, a forward. You're going to have Logan Couture, I assume, when he gets back from his injury. We'll talk about Couture a little bit here in the third segment. You have Henry Thrun, and then whenever Shakir Mukhamadullin makes his NHL debut. Those are the 4 dudes who I think are going to legitimately run the power play. So you have 2 rookies in Henry Thrun, Shakir Mukhamadullin. One guy who will be making his NHL debut this season. The other guy who has a whopping 8 NHL games under his belt. And then you have Logan Couture and you have Mikael Granlund. Both of those guys forwards who will probably be playing the point. So easy to see why the Sharks could lead the NHL in shorthanded goals. That's pretty self-explanatory. But shorthanded goals rule doesn't kill power plays yet. You're still going to be on the power play even if you give up a shorthanded goal. I think the chaos approach of just putting your 5 best forwards out there, I think we're going to see a more balanced power play with 2 perfectly cromulent power play units. You're not going to see as much wear and tear on your top guys because you're the only guys who can play power play minutes, where they're going to have to kind of eat up those big minutes. I know it's easier to play on the power play than it's to play on a penalty kill, or even play at even strength because you're kind of in 1/3 of the rink. But still, those are still minutes that you're out there. And I think David Quinn, right? Go back to when David Quinn was first hired, and I broke down the stats of David Quinn, kind of that jump from year 1 to year 2. So specifically, if you look at the power play, so 2018, 2019, the Rangers power play was 17th in the NHL at 19.38%. The next season, they jumped up to 22.91. So say, not a math guy, but that's over a 3% jump from year 1 to year 2. 7th in the league. Again, I don't think the Sharks are going to be 7th or top 10. I'm just going to say they're 16 or above, right? Top half of the league. One, I think there's going to be more structured power play without having. I know that Erik Karlsson's a wizard. I've said it many times. I love Erik Karlsson. But Erik Karlsson, kind of the entire power play ran through Erik Karlsson, right? I think with this power play, it's going to be a more structured power play where it's, kind of setting up those one-time shots or setting up those passes to let try to create an opportunity, right? Make a little bit more meat and potatoes type of power play. And I think still, even though it's not going to be as spectacular, I think it's just going to be more effective because you're not relying on Erik Karlsson to have to do Erik Karlsson wizard three things every time he steps on the ice. And I think just a deeper, right? Guys get hurt, guys get traded, whatever happens, I think you're just gonna be able to kind of fill the holes in the boat a little bit more as you kind of take on, throughout an NHL season, right? You're going to lose guys to injury, whatever it is, especially the Sharks this year. Their guys are going to get traded. I just think you're going to be able to kind of plug those holes a little bit better and kind of maintain. So I think the power play is going to be one of the talking points from the Sharks by the end of the season, and just how much better it's improved, despite, again, not having Timo Meier kind of being the sharpshooter and not having Erik Karlsson, doing spectacular Erik Karlsson things. I just think it's going to be efficient, I think is the best word. It's going to be a little bit more efficient than without those guys. So, but I still think the chaos approach is going to be there. And I think there's going to be a lot of short-handed opportunities. So, and before though we finish up, my last bold prediction: the Sharks keep one of Alexander Barabanov or Anthony Duclair. Not both, not neither. They keep one. They re-sign one to an extension before the year is over. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lot like how we saw with Tomas Hertl, right before the trade deadline, and then Hertl signs an extension. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the same thing. It's gonna be one of the or the other. And here's the case for keeping both, right? Anthony Duclair, a natural goal scorer, right? Former 30-goal scorer. If he continues to kind of improve and rebound from that injury, the Sharks don't have a lot of natural goal scorers on the team. He could be a nice addition for the Sharks. And yes, I know he's, kind of mid to late 20s right now. And maybe the timeline doesn't fit, but you're still going to need like adults in the room. And Anthony Duclair just seems like one of those dudes who's just like a good dude to have around in the locker room. And, having William Eklund sling passes to Anthony Duclair sounds pretty awesome to me. Or having Will Smith or Macklin Celebrini slinging passes or playing with a guy like Anthony Duclair sounds pretty awesome to me. So Duclair, the caveat with Duclair is if he comes out of the gate scoring goals, teams are always looking for guys who can score goals at the trade deadline, and his trade value could be higher than Alexander Barabanov, even though I think Barabanov has a more well-rounded game. Just the goal scoring, right? Teams always need secondary goal scoring in the playoffs. And I think Duclair could be that. And if he comes out of the gate strong and, going into All-Star weekend, if he's sitting around 20 goals or getting close to it, a team could become calling for a guy who's on a amazing contract at $3 million and offer you a late first round pick for a guy like Anthony Duclair to kind of come in and be that secondary goal scorer for him. Again, especially at that contract at $3 million, where late in the season, a team will be able to kind of manipulate the cap a little bit better to fit a guy like Duclair in. So on the reverse side, Barabanov, right? He's been nothing but, and I talked with Max about this yesterday, right? He's been nothing but a great Shark since he's arrived. He's, I think his game yes, he is 30 right now, but I think he doesn't have a lot of NHL miles in him. I know he played, in the KHL and stuff, but he doesn't really have a lot of miles on him. So, and I don't think his game is one that is going to age poorly, right? I think his skating ability is good. I think his transition ability is great. I think his vision and his passing is what makes him, and that doesn't go away, right? I'm not saying Joe Thornton, but look at Joe Thornton, right? Joe Thornton was able to kind of, even in his advanced age, not the best skater, definitely wants to step there, but his ability to read and see and make those passes, again, I'm not saying Alexander Barabanov is Joe Thornton, but you saw that skill not deteriorate despite Joe Thornton getting close to age 40, right? I think Barabanov's skill set will be one that ages well with whoever he continues to play with. And I think he's more valuable to the Sharks than maybe he might be to another team, right? Barabanov is not like a big penalty killer. He's an asset on the power play, right? And he's going to be that kind of gel, that glue guy on a line that can, if you need him to kind of be the playmaker or be a secondary player or, be the transition guy, he can do that. So I think the Sharks will have to make a decision, and I think they will keep one of them, but not both. So we will see. So before we continue and we talk about some news and notes, get caught up, talk about who's going to be the starter for tonight's game against the Vegas Golden Knights and what we heard from Joe, Will, and John McCarthy at the San Jose Barracuda. Do need to take a quick break and talk to you guys about our good friends over at Sleeper. The NHL season is here. I love the NHL. You love the NHL. You're literally listening to a podcast about the NHL. And that's why I want to tell you about the Sleeper app. Sleeper app is the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL Network. It's my go-to for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash on daily fantasy. NHL's never been more exciting. There's so many amazing players out there, right? You got McDavid, you got Bedard, you got Crosby, Cale Makar, whoever your favorite player is. Isn't it fun to root for them to do awesome things? Now, with the Sleeper app, you just pick more or less stats for each of the stats on the stars, like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more. You heard me, Sharks fans, 100-time payout on Sleeper. So start paying attention and get your picks right, and you could win big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. All right, let's finish up this episode with some news and notes. Logan Couture sounds like he had a setback today, so I still expect that week to week now. I was thinking maybe the kind of mental was maybe by the start of the Sharks kind of East Coast swing road trip here. Now I'm not so certain, right? Because again, they start the season at home with a bunch of games. Yes, they're all very, very tough games, but they are at home, right? With the first, I'm pulling up the schedule right now. Sharks second in the division. So yeah, they start 4 games at home before they go on the road for 5 games. Yeah, 5 games on the East Coast before getting back in beginning of November. I mean, if Couture doesn't make the beginning of the road trip, would you be surprised if we don't see Couture till the beginning of November? So they get back November 2nd versus Vancouver. They play the 29th and they have a nice kind of 4 days. So they can get back. He can start practicing with the team. Then, once they kind of get back from it and kind of get back into the swing of things. So we shall see. Again, I think the next kind of deadline now is that October 21st game against Nashville, right? They play 19th versus Boston, and then they head out to Nashville after that. So if he doesn't start the East Coast swing, again, it's Nashville, Florida, Tampa, Carolina, Washington. If he doesn't start that East Coast swing, I wouldn't be surprised if they just kind of wait until the Sharks get back into town, where they play Vancouver, Pittsburgh, Philly. They have another homestand there. So that's where I would kind of expect. David Quinn also did name Kaapo Kähkönen the starter, which I fully support. I think Kaapo Kähkönen's been the better of the 2 goalies between him and Blackwood. Not that Blackwood's been bad. I just think we talked about it a lot yesterday. I think Kaapo Kähkönen just looks like a different dude this year. So then finally, the Barracuda did have some media availability where I did get to ask some questions. So quick kind of rundown on some of the stuff there. Gannon, Laroque, they're going to kind of play it slow with him. So they're going to keep him in San Jose for now, see how he continues to rehab, right? He's still kind of dealing with some of those hip issues. They don't think it's going to be long-term, but they want to be very, very cautious with Gannon Laroque, just because, again, he's 20 years old and you don't want this hip injury to be a kind of thing he deals with the rest of his career. Better to be slow with him, keep him in house. You can kind of keep an eye on him. And then once he kind of gets back into the swing of things, they can make a decision. Do they want to send him back to the WHL, which you can kind of do at any time, right? With since he's in the American Hockey League and he's also 20, right? You can send him back at any time. Remember, Ozzy Weisblatt's rights were traded last year, even though he spent the entire season in the AHL. His rights were traded at the trade deadline just in case the Sharks or Barracuda wanted to send him back, but they're going to do that. So they're going to kind of keep him around, let him rehab. No offense to the WHL or Victoria, I'm sure they have fine doctors, but you're getting kind of NHL caliber, like it's right down the hall, right? They can physical therapy. You're getting NHL caliber versions of that right there. That's the nice thing about having your affiliates right there in the same building. They can work together. So making sure Gannon Laroque is getting the best treatment possible for the long-term benefit of him. So same thing with Artem Guryev. I think he's been a little banged up, but they're going to kind of let him test out in the AHL. They want to kind of get a good look at him before making a decision about sending him back to the OHL. And I think the Flensburg Firebirds still have his rights. Don't quote me on that, but he can officially go back to the WH or back to the OHL if he wants. But I think they're going to want to give him a nice long look before sending him back. So some other news and notes. They officially signed, I know they haven't announced it yet, but they did officially sign Tanner Kaspick and Justin Bailey to AHL deals. I like the move for both of those. I thought both those guys showed a lot, and I think Justin Bailey is going to be a good addition, especially on the scoring front for the Barracuda, for what I think is going to be a really, really fun, scrappy Barracuda team. I think should be a playoff caliber team. But both those guys are on AHL only deals. And the nice thing is if you need them, kind of like Derek Pouliot last year, if you kind of need one of these guys, you can always sign them to an NHL deal basically at any time in the season. And then you just got to run them through waivers. But that's usually not a big deal, especially with a guy like that, right? I don't think you have to worry about a guy like Justin Bailey getting signed or getting plucked in late in the season if you need a guy like that to kind of jump up for you. Eetu Makiniemi, Georgi Romanov, and Magnus Krona. It looks like they're going to be a three-headed goalie attack right now. But don't be surprised if one or multiple of them maybe go down and play in the ECHL with the Wichita Thunder. They'd want to make sure all these guys are getting games. If I had to pick, I think Magnus Krona is the backup right now. But Georgi Romanov, from what it sounds like, he's been having a very great training camp, works really hard. And he could be one of those guys that kind of makes a big push at the end of the season. And if there's a trade or if there's an injury and Eetu Makiniemi comes up, I think they feel very confident in both those guys kind of taking the load in the AHL and not kind of skipping a beat for the Barracuda as they make a kind of a big push here. Tristan Robbins is, they say, day to day after his injury on Saturday night, but he will not be available for the weekend. I know. And then Valtteri Pulley should be potentially available. They're going to kind of keep an eye on him, but it sounds like he should be available for the Barracuda this weekend. So kind of your wrap up on Barracuda news there. So yeah, I think the Barracuda, they open their season on Friday night. It's gonna be fun. I really think the Barracuda this year are gonna be really fun. I think, like I said, I think they have a really good mix of veteran guys. They've got some NHL talent, especially with like Oscar Lindblom, Jacob Peterson. You got young guys like Robbins and and Daniel Gushin. This team just has all the makings to be a really competitive team for in the AHL, and that's what you want to see, right? Is that winning culture continue to grow, and then if Bordeleau goes down at some point, then you're just adding like another great piece to it. So, and at the end of the season, when you start getting some of those prospects like Philip Beasted, and if Quentin Musty jumps there, like the end of the season, Barracuda are going to be super fun. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow where we're going to recap the first game of the season against the Vegas Golden Knights. So make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can subscribe on YouTube as well. You can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can follow me on Twitter at MyFryHole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.